Welcome. I'm thrilled to be here today to share with you a side of weight loss conversation you've likely not heard before, but we'll be hearing much more about in the coming months and years. Weight loss is something that too many people struggle with. The discussion about weight and weight related issues absolutely saturate the media, newspaper headlines, magazines, broadcast news. While some people might be sick of talking about this, others are just sick of feeling uncomfortable in their bodies, sick of trying every diet, every exercise program, and barely making any progress, or making progress only to end up back where they started. People are sick of remembering when they could still fit into their favorite jeans, and they're sick and tired of constantly struggling. Normally, when people talk about weight loss, they talk about getting healthy, and the conversations almost exclusively turns to food, calories, carbs, fat, etc., and then they'll turn to fad diets and maybe even cleanses. The conversation often turns to exercise. What kind, the wrong kind, the quick and easy kind. And these are all valid parts of the conversation and are all pieces of the puzzle, but there's a part of the conversation that's being left out and a piece of the puzzle that's been missing. This is what we're going to talk about tonight. Something that's as connected to our struggles with weight as diet and exercise, but aren't those things at all. Today, I want to share with you how the things around you, the things you bring into your home, may be part of the reason you're either seeing your weight creep up on you or why you're having a difficult time getting it to come off despite doing many of the right things. The missing piece? Environmental toxins. I'll explain what I mean by that in a moment. Now, you're probably here because weight is something you've struggled with, and you're certainly not alone. In fact, you're in the majority. Nearly 70% of the US adult population qualify as being either obese or overweight. A full 16% of children from ages 2 to 19 qualify as clinically obese. But something particular drew you here today. And I'm curious to learn from one or two of you what sparked your interest and got you wondering enough to come over to this class today. Who would like to be brave and go first? Great. So some of you are here because this is new. This isn't something you've heard about before. Actually, a show of hands of how many people here came because this is the side of the conversation that seemed new and intriguing. You may also be here because you've heard a little bit about this idea that chemical toxins in our environment can be linked to weight gain and obesity. But you don't know what this information means for you in your daily life. You might be here because you're tired of everything, trying to reach you're comfortable, happy, and confident with. But something is just not budging, and you're wondering if this might be the missing piece for you. Or you might be here because you realize that a holistic approach means it's not just looking at one thing, but looking at all things that we weave and fold together to create an ideal healthy body is best, and you're ready to finally start down that path. Regardless of why you're here, thank you. Thank you for coming out tonight to learn about a very startling way that things around us silently impact our health and our waistline. And thank you for putting yourself first. A moment ago, I said the phrase environmental toxins. How many of you know what that phrase means or what comes to mind when you hear the words environmental toxins? Anyone have an idea? If you thought about things like oil spills, then you're not wrong. But those aren't the kind of toxins I'm going to be talking about with you today. Instead, I'll be talking about the ones that are much closer to home and are in fact in your homes. Chemical toxins that hitchhike on products that you buy and use every single day. Products like the food you eat, the packaging that food comes in your tap or even bottled water, your shampoo, body lotions, makeup, and your laundry detergent, dish soap, and hair fresheners, and so on. So how did these chemicals get into these products in the first place? What on earth are they doing there? Before I answer these questions, let's back it up for just a minute because I want to explain a few things that will help you understand the bigger picture and help you understand why this is such a widespread issue. Right now, in the United States, there are 80 to 84,000 chemicals in use in commerce and around 1,000 more being added each year. Some of these chemicals have benefited us. They've given us medicines, building materials, and there's no argument that many of them have made our lives easier, better, safer, and even longer. However, vast majority of these chemicals have never been tested for safety by our government or anyone else. And these are chemicals that are being put into the products we're using every single day with very little government oversight or regulation. This bears repeating. These chemicals have never been tested for safety. Environmental toxins in the contents of this conversation are not chemicals out there in the bigger environment, but in here, in our personal environment. And these chemicals are in use. The CDC routinely tests the bodies of Americans, and they consistently are finding traces of these chemicals in our blood. They're in all of us. If you live on planet Earth, some amount of these chemicals are in you. They're so ubiquitous around the world that they're even found in the blood of polar bears living in total remote parts of the world. So how does this connect to why we're here? How do 80,000 mostly unregulated chemicals relate to the population that's 70% overweight or obese? I'll start by saying this. If cutting calories were all that it took, if it was merely calories in versus calories out, energy intake versus energy expenditure, we wouldn't have as many people struggling with weight as we do. And if you're someone who's tried diets before, someone who's done all of the right things, gone on juice fasts, cleanses, the Atkins diet, Weight Watchers, Jenny Craig, if you've done any of those things and either had no success or had some success but ended up back where you started or worse, then you know that calories in, calories out doesn't work. In fact, who has known someone who's gone on one of those diets and had totally success? And how many of you know people who've either had no success or they ended up worse than when they started? And let's not leave out those people who have consistently had to work harder than others, people who are so profoundly frustrated because no matter what they try, they can't get the kind of traction that other people can doing the same exact things. And maybe this is you or someone you know. Why is it so hard for me? When my best friend and my cousin went on a diet and they lost 20 pounds in a few weeks, and I'm doing everything that they're doing, but it's not working, people who experience this often blame themselves. They think they're doing something wrong or something is wrong with them. I'm here to tell you that this is not true. It's not your fault. And there is a reason why some people struggle more than others. And before you leave here today, you will have a better understanding of why that is and why it is not your fault. The reason can be directly linked back to these things we're bringing into our homes and into our lives that are silently invading our bodies. I want to take a few minutes to talk about my personal story, just so you understand where I'm coming from and why I'm so passionate about sharing this information with you. I have a long history of chronic health issues with IBS and digestive issues and skin issues as a kid, which brought me all the way into college. In college, I studied with an herbalist, cleaned my diet, healed my skin and my digestive issues. Went on my merry way, lived all over the country, studied horticulture, ended up here, got married, working for Bailey Nurseries for many years. And then I decided to go to the Institute for Integrative Nutrition. And as a student, just fresh after having a baby, I graduated, and all of a sudden my face started exploding and became this extremely crazy rash. And I decided to do something that I never tried before, and that was I took all the chemicals out of my food, my life, so only natural cleaners, only natural makeup, and it absolutely changed my life. Not only did I lose weight, my skin cleared up on its own without going on really heavy antibiotics, is what they wanted me to do, just by doing that one simple thing. So my intention for you today is twofold. One, to give you a clear picture of how unsuspecting items in your home may be interfering with or undermining all of the hard work you put in keeping yourself fit and healthy, or that what you're putting in to get yourself there. And two, to give you actionable steps that you can take as soon as you get home to start reducing your exposure to the chemical toxins I'll be talking about today. In fact, before we finish, I'll be passing out a really great handout for you to take home with clear and specific action steps you can take based on what you'll be learning. And before we're finished today, I'm going to share some of the ways that I support my clients around making the kind of changes we'll be touching on tonight. So how did we get here? Were insights like this, where sites like this are far more common, and hats off to that woman for wearing a bikini. How did we get to a place in a time where nearly 70% of our population qualifies as overweight or obese? How did we get to a place in time where our children are heavier than ever, where a full 16% of children from ages 2 to 9 qualify as clinically obese? Are those 2-year-olds just not exercising enough? If you look back to your parents' generation or your grandparents' generation, rates of overweight just didn't exist the way they do today. Yet there were people who were overweight, but they were the minority, not the majority. Things have dramatically changed. The landscape of the world that we live in has dramatically changed in the last 50 to 60 years. When we consider things from a holistic viewpoint, we can see quite clearly that there is never just one thing that causes illness or health struggles to take place. It's never just one thing. You don't just get a cold because you sat next to someone on the bus who had a cold. You came down with a cold because when you were exposed to that bug, your immune system was down, which could be a result of an imbalance of healthy bacteria in your gut compounded by a lost night of sleep. There's never just one thing. As the holistic health coach, it's my job to delve into these underlying causes. This is part of what sets health coaching as an industry apart from dietitians and nutritionists and your regular medical doctor. We're looking at all sides and all the pieces of the puzzle. So the truth is, there are always things happening in concerts. It's not just one instrument that makes a song. It's an orchestra that together creates music. Things must happen together to create an outcome. Nothing happens in isolation. My work is dedicated to identifying what those root causes are so we can change the outcome. You don't get cancer, cancer develops. You don't catch cancer, cancer develops. And cancer develops because there are a number of things happening in the body at the same time that are creating an atmosphere for disease or illness to take hold. It's the same with this global increase in weight because it's not just one thing. It's just too many calories. It's not just soda. It's not just less exercise. What we have is a trifecta. 3 things that converged to create a perfect storm that have all happened in the last 50 to 60 years that have led us to this place. 3 things that have simultaneously brought us here. These 3 things are: 1, we are a nation of desk sitters. We're working desk jobs instead of fields and factory jobs. We're also driving more instead of walking, and we're becoming less physically active overall. 2, we've seen dramatic changes to our food supply. The introduction of heavily processed cheap foods that are loaded with synthetic preservatives, artificial colors, flavors, and sweeteners, and other chemicals, some of which we'll be talking about tonight. We have an introduction of fast food, empty calories, and more food available to us than at any other time in history. And 3, the influx of chemicals into the marketplace since the 1950s. Okay, so we're here to talk about chemicals and weight, what these connections are, how we can identify where they're hiding in our homes, and what we can do to avoid exposure. And by the time we finish today, you will want to avoid these after learning what they are capable of doing. Question: who has ever been on or has known anyone that's been on a medication that has a side effect of weight gain? We all know this happens. Drug makers know this happens. Avandia, a diabetes drug that's intended to improve insulin sensitivity, has a side effect that causes people to gain weight. This drug has been highly restricted in the US after it also discovered it was increasing the risk of heart attacks, but outright banned in the European Union. Antidepressants like Lexapro, Paxil, Prozac, and Zoloft can also cause weight gain, sometimes significant weight gain. A topic that's all over the news. Here are 4 headlines speaking to this. This is a well-established side effect. Even birth control pills have been known to have tremendous impacts on weight for many women taking them. We all know that medications like this can have these side effects. Sometimes it's just 1 round of these prescriptions that can leave someone with 10, 20, 40 extra pounds, and then they can spend the rest of their lives taking the weight off. What's frightening here? What's happening here? Does anyone have any thoughts or ideas as to why this might be happening? Well, I'll tell you why. These are pharmaceuticals, chemical medications that are part of the class of chemicals called obesogens. Has anyone ever heard of that word before? Does anyone want to take a stab at what that means? Obesogens are chemicals that directly or indirectly affect our weight in ways that can result in obesity through the disruption of metabolic, hormonal, or developmental process. These are chemicals that interfere with our body's regulatory system, which ultimately determines our metabolism, our weight, how our fat cells develop, appetite, and satiety and cues. And there are different ways that it can do this. I want to start by explaining a little bit of the biology of what's happening inside your bodies so that you know what's going on. This is important to know. This is your body after all. This is how your body functions. So let's look at how some of these chemicals that we encounter in our personal environment act as obesogens. Chemicals that can make us fat. And I'll be walking through a few of them that you all likely have in your homes right now in a few minutes. We'll start by taking a look at our endocrine system. Who knows what the endocrine system does? Our endocrine system is a collection of glands that secrete hormones. These hormones act as chemical messengers and regulate everything from metabolism, growth, and development to sex drive, sleep, appetite, and even your mood. The endocrine system is very sensitive, and very subtle changes in hormone levels can affect any of the systems regulated by those hormones. The endocrine system functions in sort of a lock and key mechanism. Your endocrine system is made up of all these locks called hormone receptors. Hormones traveling through your body fit into these locks and act like keys, turning on and off various signals and functions within the body that regulate all those things I just mentioned: hunger, weight, metabolism, etc. Many of these chemicals we encounter out there, including obesogenic ones, very closely resemble our own natural hormones and actually act as synthetic hormones. These synthetic hormones, again, found in the products that we're using every day, are able to mimic or block estrogen and testosterone in those hormone receptors. This means that they'll be moving throughout your body, landing in those hormone receptor locks, and will start to turn on or off the signals in our bodies that otherwise would never have been turned on or off. They're able to perfectly mimic those natural hormones in the body. So aside from altering those hormone signals in your body, obesogenic chemicals, also referred to as endocrine disrupting chemicals, can also alter the way our fat cells actually develop. And they do this by interfering with our bodies. Master regulator of fat cell development, the sort of motherboard control system that regulates how our fat cells develop. When obesogens interfere with this receptor, the body's response is to tell the fat cells to increase in number and increase in size. Obesogens that work in this way also have the ability to predispose certain stem cells in the body to become fat cells rather than, say, a bone or a liver cell. Activating this master regulator can change a cell that's already a fat cell in the body to become larger, meaning more fat is stored inside the cell. When you see this has nothing to do with diet and exercise, these are chemicals that are causing our fat cells to grow. So here's a normal fat cell. It has a little fat in it. And here's a fat cell that's been activated by some of these obesogenic chemicals. It's loaded with fat cells that are bigger and more in number. This is exactly how medications like clozapine, sometimes used to treat anxiety, work, and the same with Avandia, the diabetes medication that resulted in weight gain, worked. Other obesogens have the ability to alter our metabolic rates so that our bodies store more calories rather than burn them. A number of different types of pesticides act as obesogens. In the body by disrupting the weight controlling hormones, things like thyroid hormone, estrogens, testosterone, insulin, growth hormones, and leptin. Leptin is a hormone that tells your body you're full and normally suppress appetite, but obesogens interfere with the release of this hormone in a way that researchers believe leads people to become resistant to it. Becoming resistant to the hormone that tells you you're full means that you don't feel full when you should, and you overconsume food. Other ways that chemicals make us fat: they lead to insulin resistance. Insulin is a hormone that allows your body to use the sugar you consume. If you become resistant to insulin, your body can use food and energy the way it's supposed to, and can lead to your body storing fat more easily, can increase fatigue, and increase your cravings for more carbohydrates. Here's how this works. You eat food. Your body responds by producing insulin, whose job it is to transport the sugar in that food to your cells for energy. But because your body has become resistant to insulin, it can't do that, and instead stores that sugar as fat. Because your cells never got the sugar needed to give you energy, you feel both tired and hungry. which causes you to eat more food. This obviously is not a position we want to be in, especially if we're already trying to lose weight. Remember a moment ago I was talking about those prescription medications, Avandia and clozapine? And now these are drugs that can trigger weight gain in some cases very quickly. Now you know that these drugs are delivered in very small doses and that these drugs, in fact, almost all pharmaceuticals are designed to have a physical pharmaceutical effect at very, very low levels. Medications like these are delivered to the body in parts per billion doses. Really teeny tiny doses. What is a teeny tiny dose? What does 1 part per billion mean? To illustrate just how teeny tiny 1 part per billion is, I want you to think of it this way. Let's say your body was a 600,000 gallon Olympic-sized swimming pool. 1 part per billion is equal to about 1 teaspoon diluted in that pool. Some medications are delivered in doses that are bioactive, meaning they have an effect on the body. Lowering cholesterol, preventing pregnancy, stopping an asthma attack, that are less than 1 part per billion, which is less than 1 teaspoon in an Olympic-sized pool. Your body in particular, your endocrine system, just as I mentioned, is designed to respond to these teeny tiny doses. Your entire hormonal system, that lock and key system I mentioned earlier, is designed to be responsive to infinitesimal levels of hormones in the body. The chemicals we're exposed to on a daily basis through the things we bring into our homes expose us to those same low levels and are able to biologically active, meaning they can have an impact like pharmaceuticals at very low levels. A lot of people think, oh, but it's such a small amount, it can't really matter. Conventional thinking tells us that for something to be toxic, a bigger amount of it is going to be worse, and the more dangerous that a smaller amount of it. And in many cases, this is true, except when it comes to chemicals that interfere with our endocrine or hormonal system, in which case smaller amounts matter more. Okay, let's get into some specifics because these are things that we're bringing into our home. So what kind of things? Does anyone have any idea as to what kinds of things in their home might contain obesogens? Shot in the dark if you're not sure.
Are you just reading?
I want to give you 3 examples of really common things that I promise nearly all of you have in your homes right now that could be contributing to your struggle with weight, and how you can avoid them without turning your life upside down. The first example is pesticides. Over 1 billion pounds of pesticides are used on U.S. crops each year, and 9 of the top 10 pesticides used are obesogens. The average consumer is exposed between 10 to 13 pesticide residues in their food and water every single day, multiple times per day, meaning in each glass of water you drink and in each meal that you eat, you can pretty much bet that you're consuming between 10 and 13 types of pesticides, which translates into low-dose chronic exposure. Atrazine, one of the most widely used pesticides on the market, is directly linked to abdominal obesity. That's the dreaded belly fat. And as I mentioned before, insulin resistance. One animal study showed that chronic low-dose exposure, particularly when paired with high-fat diet, resulted in weight gain. Being that atrazine is commonly found in our public water supply, the water that we drink every single day would be considered a chronic low-dose exposure source. And for people who consume a high-fat diet, we can definitely see how the atrazine can be a huge problem. So besides water, how else are pesticides like atrazine coming into our homes? Well, they're also hitchhiking on all the conventional produce, dairy, and meats that you're buying. Conventional produce is loaded with pesticide residues, many of which don't wash off no matter how hard you try. When it comes to meat and dairy, livestock animals are often fed diets that include growth-promoting hormones and antibiotics. Many of these hormones and antibiotics promote growth and weight gain in animals in the same way they do us. When we consume animals that were raised using synthetic hormones, we end up ingesting them too. What do you think happens to us when we eat growth promoting hormones? So what are our options here? Does this news mean that you should stop eating fruits and vegetables for fear of pesticide contamination? Obviously not. Eating fruits and vegetables over not eating them is always a better choice. Ideally, what you want to do is commit to purchasing organic foods. Organic foods bearing the USDA seal are grown and raised without the use of pesticides, with a few exceptions, and don't carry residues commonly found on conventional grown foods. The easiest way to identify organic foods is on the produce sticker. All USDA certified organic foods will have the number 9 at the beginning of the PLU number on the sticker. I want to stress that organic food is not a fad. It is not a food snob or elitist thing. It's a straight up health thing and the way food is used to be grown. Industrial scale pesticides didn't start to be used until 1950. So technically speaking, organic food is what our parents and grandparents grew up eating, even though they weren't aware of it. To them, it was just food. This is a perfect example of what I'm saying earlier when I mentioned how much thinner earlier generations were. And if you're thinking it is right now, yes, organic food is slightly more expensive than conventional food, but it's helpful to think of it as an investment in your health because it does make a difference. Studies have shown that children who ate organic foods were able to drop circulating levels of certain pesticides in the body to undetectable levels in only 5 days, meaning the payoff is almost immediate. The slightly higher price tag for organic foods can deter some people who are on a budget. So if you need to prioritize, the best way to do so is by using the Environmental Working Group's Dirty Dozen Clean 15 list. Every year, the Environmental Working Group releases an update to their popular Dirty Dozen list, which highlights the top 12 foods with the highest pesticide levels and the top 15 conventional foods with the lowest pesticide load. This way, if you buy only organic versions of the items on the Dirty Dozen list, then you'll be making a huge impact on the number of pesticides you're consuming. I've included a copy of this guide in your take-home packet tonight, so you can print it out and keep it right in your purse or wallet. Let's move on to the second example of obesogens in your kitchen, canned foods. Who here has a can of beans or tomato sauce sitting in their pantry at home? Don't be shy, I'm not judging. Most people do. And who has heard of something called BPA? In what context have you heard of it? Chances are you've probably heard of it in relation to baby bottles. BPA is short for bisphenol A, which is called a plasticizer and is responsible, among other things, for making some types of plastics hard and rigid. You may recall that a few years ago there was a big uproar when it was discovered that this plasticizer BPA has another quality. It's a hormone disrupting chemical. In fact, it always has been. It was developed back in the early 1900s as a synthetic form of estrogen. BPA is one of the chemicals whose obesogenic properties are to change the way our fat cells grow and develop, resulting in bigger and more plentiful fat cells. BPA, like many other chemicals found in plastics and other places, can very easily be released from the product and leached into the food and water it comes into contact with. This was why it was so upsetting when it was found that BPA was in plastic baby bottles. Babies were being exposed to BPA through milk or water or juice that they drank every single day. Aside from BPA in baby bottles, one of the most ubiquitous uses of BPA is as a lining on the inside of cans. Cans of beans, tomatoes, soup cans, soda cans, beer cans. Cans are lined to prevent the food or liquid inside from touching the aluminum itself. which can also leach into the food, affect the taste of the food, and over time can be eaten away by the food. So cans are lined with BPA simply to prevent this from happening. Seems like a good thing, right? Unfortunately, as you start to see, the use of BPA is simply a trade-off. Because BPA is one of the most widely produced chemicals in commerce, the Centers for Disease Control has found this hormone disrupting chemical in bodies of nearly every single person tested. As we all move towards eating healthier, one of the transitions we can make is to eat less packaged processed foods and eat more whole, fresh foods. This should include cutting back on canned foods, but the reality is that some canned foods do offer us really great time savers. Cooking beans from scratch just isn't an option for many of us. So I want to make sure to offer an easy solution here. Although I say this is the exception to the rule. One company, Eden Organic, makes a line of canned beans, all of which are in cans that don't use the same kind of lining as the rest of the can industry, and their cans are free of BPA, so you can safely choose that brand. As for other canned foods, you do want to move away from consuming as many canned food items as possible. Canned tomatoes are another staple that you really should avoid, sadly, because canned tomatoes have the highest levels of BPA in them. What you can do is offer tomatoes in glass jars, also from Eden Organics or companies like BioNature. If you cook a lot or use a lot of canned tomatoes, then this is a switch you definitely want to make. Otherwise, skip the canned. The third example I want to talk about tonight is something called PFOA. Who here knows what I'm talking about when I say PFOA? Okay, let's try it this way. Who here owns any nonstick items such as nonstick pans or nonstick baking sheets, nonstick muffin tins, or who knows? Who simply knows exactly what I mean when I say nonstick? Show of hands. Okay, good. So all or most of you actually are familiar with PFOA then. Nonstick cookware is made with PFOA or perfluorooctanoic acid. It is also found in microwave, popcorn bags, ice cream containers. It's used to keep the food from sticking to the sides, so it's in most food contact paper products that are grease-proof. PFOA has been also classified as an obesogen, like BPA is suspected hormone-disrupting chemical. Specifically, PFOA impacts thyroid hormones, which are essential for regulating our weight and metabolism. PFOA can mess with the growth and development of our fat cells, resulting in more and bigger fat cells. This is also one of those chemicals which, if you're exposed to while pregnant, has a potential to predispose children to a lifetime of battling overweight and obesity. This chemical also messes with our leptin levels, which I talked about before. So what do we do about this one? The best thing to do is avoid cooking with nonstick cookware whenever possible. This can seem a little daunting if your entire cookware set is nonstick, but if it's in any way scratched or flaking, you definitely want to replace it. Thankfully, their safer replacements are both readily available and inexpensive. Just opt for cast iron, enameled cast iron, stainless steel, stoneware, and glass. What's great is that really inexpensive cast iron can, over time, if cared for properly, become just as nonstick as nonstick, like Sunnyside eggs sliding off the pan kind of nonstick. Any well-stocked kitchen supply store will carry these inexpensive options, and unlike nonstick, these will last you a lifetime and will never need to be replaced. Additionally, and possibly more important, avoid the use of microwave popcorn. Go back to stove popping or air popping your organic popcorn instead. This way you can avoid the dose of PFOA and chemicals from inside of the popcorn bag. Some of these chemicals our bodies, including PFOA, if we're exposed to them prenatally, meaning while pregnant, can predispose those children to gain weight as children or into adulthood. These are examples of people who were programmed to gain weight. The people who are predisposed from birth to put on more weight than people who aren't predisposed. This is partly what explains why some people just have more difficult time losing weight than others. Their bodies are programmed because of the chemical exposure in their parents' or even grandparents' lives that predispose their offspring. That's you and your children and grandchildren carry more weight. It doesn't mean that they will, it just predisposes them to. So in the face of junk food and not enough exercise and additional compounding environmental chemicals like obesogens, the desk is stacked against that individual. This is why so many people in our population struggle from childhood and seem to struggle more than everyone else. This is why it's not your fault. For those people who have been dealt this hand, who have to work even harder to keep their weight in check, for the people who eat one piece of cake and a balloon and balloon out, it's extra important for them to do everything possible to support their body's natural detoxification process and to eliminate as many chemical toxins in their lives as possible. This is what I work with my clients on doing. This is the foundation of my approach to helping clients get well. As you can see, just from what we talked about today, looking at health and especially weight loss from only one perspective of food and calories in, calories out, is going to leave out this entire area of environmental toxins that can contribute to our struggles. I know by now you can see how critically important it is to take a holistic approach to looking at your short and long-term health. But before we continue to talk about specific ways that you can support your own body starting when you get home, I'd like to step to the side and share with you something I've been doing to help my private clients reach their weight loss goals. I work with my clients in a 30-day whole food clean eating challenge and also one-on-one where they get results, losing weight, having more energy, and accomplishing their goals. And I would like to invite each of you to a private session with me. But keep in mind, I'm teaching 60 people at the time, so I only have about 5 spots available. Great. Thank you for allowing me that little step to the side. I wanted to make sure that before we finish today, I could invite you to connect with me and keep this conversation going. So back to the topic at hand. Now that we know many of the chemicals around us are making their way into us, what do? Well, it turns out that our body is capable of detoxifying many of these chemicals, not all, but many, up to a point.